Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Openly. It's 11 o'clock in East Africa, and I hope wherever you are in the world you're well and you're safe. Let's Talk Openly is a series of 3 webinars that will look at, determine the opportunity for African enterprises, service providers and businesses around open computing. My name is Paul Statham and I'm the Regional Director for Atlancis here in Africa. And I'm joined by a powerhouse panel here. Firstly, Steve Helvey, who's the Vice President of Channel Development for the Open Compute Project, a man whose enthusiasm is infectious. Daniel Njuguna founded Atlancis nearly 10 years ago and has seen a lot of the emergence of ICT as a big sector in East African economy, driving business whilst being a significant business in its own right. And lastly, we're very pleased to have Dr. Gilbert Sagia with us today. He's an absolute powerhouse leader of ICT across East Africa, serving in leadership positions with most of the mainstream household names that build the data centers of Africa. Our agenda today will start with Dr. Sagia, with a very interesting piece around what OCP will be, could be in Africa and how it can support global competitiveness of African citizens, African SME and African companies on the global stage. Dan and Njuguna will then look at what Atlantis has been doing with OCP, the investments we've made and the strides we've taken in making this an open source hardware and software that can now be implemented to support African businesses. And then lastly, a great piece which I've had the pleasure of seeing many times, looking at some of the basic tenets of OCP design and what the OCP Foundation has been doing to support a number of projects in different areas of the data center and distributed networks to support a far more compelling CapEx, OpEx and environmental sustainability proposition than perhaps we've been used to in the past. And then lastly, we'll take some questions and answers if there are any. We expect this to last about 45 minutes. And again, thank you very much for joining us today. And so I'm very pleased to hand over to Dr. Gilbert Sagia, who's going to give us some great insights into the role OCP, Open Compute, can play in the future of African development.
Hello, my name is Dr. Gilbert Sagia from Titans Africa. My part is just to touch on the impact of OCP as a movement, as a platform, as an innovation directional strategy for Africa and across Africa. BCG early this year, I believe in March, released a couple of impact surveys or indices that indicate the potential of Africa as far as digital transformation goes, but this was specific to digital acceleration in terms of where is Africa in the stack of all the continents on the planet as far as digital acceleration index goes. Unfortunately, as someone will dare say expectedly, Africa lags in almost all segments. But one segment that it is strongest in is in business strategy. So the strategy is there for digital transformation in Africa. What is lacking is execution. And that execution that lack of execution is as a result of several factors. Some of them could be skill sets, some could be funds, some could be technology barriers, some could be cultural, some could be that there's just a lot more other things to deal with at the present. And yet we all believe that digitization starts to benefit the content the most when focused on. For this purpose, for OCP, we want to address the compute part of the challenge for digitization or digital acceleration index. And Africa is unique in a couple of ways, right? There's quite a huge journey to go to, and yet it bears some of the highest cost per capita when it comes to digital transformation. It means, therefore, we need solutions, such as what OCP presents, that brings down that barrier as low as possible. Also, the economies do not allow for generating, I will call it macroeconomic wealth in the mid to top sector. It means they need to really, really focus on the lower end of the pyramid. And that portion at the bottom of the pyramid is basically derived from making sure that there's lower barriers of cost of entry, but also making sure that the cost per unit is minimized as much as possible. And the challenge we've seen across the continent is that traditional way of executing, traditional way of executing on digitization, especially from a hardware perspective and software, has not been very friendly from a pocket-wise to African businesses, African governments, policymakers as well. And therefore, it impedes general growth and adoption of technology. So we need to address this and address it at a large scale, not at a micro scale. And therefore, this leads me to what I would call digital transformation that has got a sustainable development path with it. Right? It's not about being able to do something once, it's being able to do it continuously, sustainably, and make it sustainable across board. The other is making sure that the adoption of technology addresses the various digital inequalities, but making sure also those inequalities that are driven by differences in economics, in skill sets, we address those ones using the transformation strategy that we set across. The other one is digitization that actually boosts employment at scale. Right, is very, very important. Developments that make sure that employments are created on continent more than off continent are very, very important as well for making sure we address the employment challenge. The other as well is developments for digital transformation that has got environmental footprint considerations with it, and the OCP offers quite a bit of that, right? Because the challenge will be that you embark on this massive scale digitization and then we end up with a non-sustainable environmental footprint. So it's very, very important to be able to do that. And a couple of traditional, say, cultural behaviors, so to speak, of Africa as a continent enable that to happen. So culturally, Africa is a continent where people do what? They do share, they reuse things, they collaborate more and more rather than use in silos. So that collaboration and reuse, which is already embedded in African culture, can actually be driven into how we consume compute as well on the continent. Why is all this very important? Because we need to also be able to drive innovation at a scale, like we said already, at the bottom of the pyramid, drive innovation that way, but innovation without driving up at the same level the costs that what it costs to be able to take on those innovations, also to consume those kind of innovations. Now, being able to do these kind of innovations at scale enables us to be able to leapfrog certain, I would call it digitization steps for the continent and go straight out to the value end, that would definitely speed up and accelerate adoption of digital transformation strategies. Again, going back to the beginning, why is all this important? It's because strategy is there and Africa is pretty okay in strategy and all kinds of ideas around that, but execution is lacking. And OCP enables that to happen from what everybody else has already mentioned when it comes to cost, reuse, capability to be able to lengthen the lifespan of the products, and being able to also have a skill set that are massive scale because of the reusability of skills without it being very dependent on one manufacturer. You can take the same skill set and use it across all the various vendors. And all these lead us where we like to end in terms of entrepreneurship. Being able to allow Africa's youth dividend to start taking on this advantage of OCP to drive and accelerate us capturing the youth dividend, which is literally capital just sitting there. Average age in Africa is what, 18 years, give or take, right? That kind of capability, being given the right innovation tools, right price points, can accelerate how employment is created at an entrepreneurship level for the youth without having to wait for formal employment to be created by major enterprises or government, because that isn't just there. So for me, OCP is not a good to have for Africa, it is a must have, and it's a strategy that is very important for every country, every business to look at very strongly to driving innovation at scale bring sustainable development when it comes to governments, being able to make sure that we look at the environment footprint that Africa cannot afford to execute on without having a second thought yet, and being able to make sure that digital inclusion is a case for all countries and all peoples in Africa. Thank you very much. Looking forward to more questions and having a discussion the rest of the meetings. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sagia, for some really insightful points there, which I think will give all of us in Africa some great hope around how open compute can impact the future of this continent. Now we'll go to Dan and Njuguna, who will look at some practical implementation cases of open compute, both by Atlantis and also into our customer base, and explore in detail the benefits that they can bring to businesses in Africa.
Thank you for your time. My name is Daniel Njuguna. I'm from Atlantis Technologies. Atlantis Technologies is a company headquartered in Nairobi. We are a solution integrator. We do work with a variety of manufacturers, addressing our customer needs, from providing turnkey solutions to bespoke solutions based on customer requirements. So today I'll be talking about the open source movement in Africa and how it's impacting organizations and the delivery of solutions to our customers. And we'll also talk about our experience at Atlantis in our journey around open source and open hardware as well. So Atlantis has had a good history in Africa. We are a Pan-African organization. We've deployed a lot of turnkey solutions in many customers in Africa, from East Africa to West Africa and Southern Africa. We are currently headquartered in Nairobi, though we have other branch offices around the continent. And most of our customers cut from all the verticals. So we have customers in the public sector. In the private sector, we have customers in telcos, in manufacturing, in mining, and all the likes. So we are an organization that delivers solutions based on what customers need. And those needs might be from networking to software-defined data center or software-defined networking, software-defined storage, among many other solutions. And in terms of the partners we work with, from the OEM landscape, you can see us has been listed on the slide. And with time, Atlantis has been deploying solutions from different original equipment manufacturers. And this has led us to an inflection point, which happened about two or 3 years ago, that has brought us into the Open Compute project, or the Open Compute Foundation, and has also helped us to shift our business strategy to see where our business is going and where the world is also going in terms of technology delivery to customers. So what brought the change and our involvement into the Open Compute project? Most of our customers have been asking these questions. Development is, we have a limited pool of resources. And are we able to reuse what we already have? Are we able to reuse code? Are we able to reuse the infrastructure that we've already deployed? Does this infrastructure or these solutions have a second life? Or once we've finished with one version, that particular product cannot be used again. Things like training, it has been very, very key, because part of the deployments that we do also have a big training cost. And when the training cost reaches at some level, it becomes also unbearable to a customer. For example, when we tell a customer that you can only get this training when you go to the UK or South Africa or Dubai, and we cannot be able to deliver this training locally, it becomes a problem for these customers to be able to absorb the solutions that we are given. Total cost of ownership is always a big consideration. And over the last 20 years, from around the year 2000, customers in Africa have been investing heavily in technology. this has reached to a point where the data centers are full, but the cost of technology still goes up each and every year. So the total cost of ownership of the products that we've been deploying has been having a lot of impact on the businesses of our customers. And fourth is the licensing. If you deliver solutions, whether they're infrastructure or their software solutions, the licensing is a big consideration. If you say, for example, you're going to buy this perpetual license, which will cost you $40,000 per processor or per core, for example, and then every year also you need to pay a certain amount, say 20, 22% for that particular license. And then the hardware that this particular license runs on, it also becomes another cost consideration. So licensing has been a very big challenge for the technologies that we've deployed before. And these are some of the things that the customer has always been bringing up. The cost of XX is very expensive. The cost of these vendor licenses are very expensive. And what are we going to do as the solution provider or the solution integrator to give them better value for money? The last two has been the lock-in and the lack of interoperability. For example, if a customer buys a certain product from ourselves, if we sell you 2 storage arrays from different vendors, you cannot buy 5 disks for you to use across the 2 storage arrays. Whenever you want to do an upgrade, you'll have to buy a disk from the particular vendor that gave you the array. And those goes for memory, goes for other components, for fiber channel cards, and all the other components that go into whether it's servers, SFPs, and switches and the like. So the lack of interoperability between components has always been a big problem. If you have to buy SFPs pluggable from a vendor, it will probably cost $1,000 or more. But if you go to the open market where we get open pluggables, it's probably $100. So customers have been asking, what is so special about this particular pluggable that it cannot work on my switch, and it costs 10 times of what other pluggables are out there in the open market. So the vendor lock-ins and the fact that you cannot use products from other manufacturers, which are actually the best products like memories from one manufacturer, will not work on 2 different chassis or servers of different OEMs. And that has always been a challenge. And Atlancis learned early enough that we cannot continue giving customers and convincing them each and every other time they need to get more capacity. The reasons why they need to spend more and the reasons why they need to go deeper into getting locked into some of these solutions. And we listened to the voice of the customer, and we decided for us, as a business, let's look for solutions that are going to make sense for them, and they'll give them value for money in the future, and they'll also be sustainable. And that's why Atlantis made the decision to go into the Open Compute project. Open Compute project at that time, maybe 3 years ago, was not very active around the enterprise. There was, of course, a lot of efforts to come out of the hyperscalers and spread into telcos and enterprises. And I think Atlantis came in at the right time. And the reasons were very simple. They addressed, they talked to the voice of the customer directly, because the reason why Open Compute was set up initially was to address the same pain points that our customers had. So we are now able to tell customers about shorter lead times. We're able to tell them about no lock-ins. In terms, you can get a disk from whichever vendor. It's just a 2.5 or a 3.5 inch disk, whether it's a solid state disk or it's a hard drive, and you can use it on the particular server you have. You can get any processor from Intel, ARM, and the other processors or AMD that are available, and you're able to use them on the original chassis that you bought from a different vendor. And also you're able to reuse what you already have. So you can create solutions from the already infrastructure that you have You might only need probably to upgrade the memory or the processor, or change the disk size to get a higher disk size on your chassis. And all these advantages and all these reasons that drove us to OCP are all part of the software open source movement. And if you look at what the open source is from the software side is able to provide, is actually what is being provided now in the OCP community. And the ability for you also to come up with your own bespoke designs, because customers have different needs. They have some customers are already looking at liquid cooled data centers. Some customers want to look at data centers that without cooling. So some customers are looking at packing more compute into their racks. Some want a lot of storage into their racks. So you're able to create custom configurations or bespoke designs that are able to meet the customers at their point of need. We do not have one chassis or one box that is able to do be forced to be used for each and every of our customers' requirements. And so far, we have seen a lot of benefits with OCP, and the most of these benefits are already being realized by some of our customers. And Atlancis also being an OCP user, we have already seen a lot of benefits to the products that we've been able to launch into the market. And this has also brought us even to have more conviction that we need to aggressively educate and be able to show our customers what we have been able to achieve ourselves. And some of also of our first customers that are already focusing on OCP. So we've had on our own use cases, and most of the successful use cases that we've deployed have also been done with a very lean number of staff. Most of the trainings have been in-house and online for what we've been able to deploy, and also the support from the community is basically unmatched. Most of the things that we're able to do are straight from getting support from the OCP Foundation and the OCP community. So our use case deployment is we deployed a couple of racks for OCP equipment, and the OCP equipment we deployed was based on OCP rack version 1, version 1.1.0, and the same racks are still available in the market through second user equipment. And part of our deployment is using second user equipment. We're able to get a lot of compute and storage into hybrid chassis. We're also able to get second user racks and switching, and all of these are still sold as new equipment, so they still come with a 5-year warranty. We build on top of that using various open source tools for cloud management. We are using Apache OpenStack for managing our cloud platform. We're using software-defined storage. We're using software-defined networking, and all the rest of the components are open source components. And we've also had to do a lot of development to extend the capabilities of OpenStack into billing. So we're able to do the whole self-service capabilities and be able to charge in local currencies for both using cards and mobile money. So on top of the OCP stack of technologies, we already also built software infrastructure that is able to work with open compute, and we could not be able to do this with the usual vendor equipment, because, for example, if you want to do software-defined storage, it means I'll have to use the software-defined storage from the hardware vendor, because the vendor for the hardware already deploys their storage chassis with controllers running their own storage operating systems. And if OpenStack wants to talk to the storage, the interfacing through whether they are provided APIs or not is a very complex undertaking. And the same also happens for networking. We're able to use the open switches. We used to wedge 100s on the racks, and these are 100 gig switches, and able to run Timulus Linux on them to deploy network operating systems. And this network operating system is able to talk to Neutron project in OpenStack. So we have had very big successes with our own platforms, and these are the experiences that we are also taking out to customers, and also taking customers to look at the infrastructure that we've deployed in Nairobi. And there's a lot of learnings that we've had, and we are able to share these with our customers. So these are some of the OCP racks when they were being deployed. You can see they come fully racked. I'm sure Steve will talk later about the design tenets of why these racks look a bit strange from your day-to-day racks in the data centers. But the simplicity that goes into deploying OCP equipment is unmatched. If, for example, one of these racks is carrying more than 30 servers, it's carrying more than 1.8 petabytes of storage with 3 power supplies, as a combined network throughput of more than 200 gigabytes per second, and all these fitting in one rack and being able to deliver as one solution is unmatched. If we had to use traditional vanity brand solutions, it means we'll probably be talking about 5 or 10 racks. So even the data center footprint alone is one of the many advantages that we're able to get by using OCP equipment. So because of this, we get a lot of publicity and recognition through the Open Compute project, and also through the international media outlets, because this deployment of our cloud platform, the Savannah cloud platform, which is actually available at savannah.com, it's something that has not happened before in Africa. And these were the first racks that were ever shipped into an African data center, and in actual production at the moment. And these racks is one of our biggest achievement with OCP in terms of sizing, but we're also having a lot of other customers that we're already talking to, especially the big customers, the customers that have a lot of data, that are already very much interested to move from the legacy brands and be able to reap from the advantages of what we've been already able to achieve into using OCP. So as I mentioned earlier, some of the benefits that Atlancis has realized is a huge reduction in capex. Estimation over 95% reduction in license fees, because we already using almost 99% of our software is from open source. We've also had a lot of reduction in capex and opex. We don't have most the equipment that is already shipped and we are using already has 5 years warranty. We already probably into two years, and we've not replaced a single disk. So we are not seeing any more capex that we're able to spend. And even more than that, because of the cost of the equipment, we're able to ship the equipment together with the spares. So we'll not wait for 2 weeks or 3 weeks for us to get a replacement of the disks. We already have complete servers and complete storage J boards already populated, already waiting to replace any of the faulty equipment that we identify in our data centers where we are collocating. Support cost is heavily reduced as well. We are not paying any support to external vendors. In fact, the support cost that we're experiencing is the hands on the equipment the people and our staff that are going to support the different solutions. There's no licensing fees, so of course that also brings down the annual support in terms of software maintenance. And some of these advantages are what we realized by our past deployments. And I'm sure as the practice becomes more and more mature, we're going to realize higher and more benefits, because we've already streamlined our trainings, we've streamlined our support, we've streamlined how we are holding our spares and how many spares we can keep and for how many customers. So this is very important to us. And as the start of this journey, we already have set the necessary structures that will enable us to reap even more from the benefits of open compute. And this also goes to our customers, because some of the things that CIOs don't sleep at night is what happens when my equipment goes down. How long will it take you to bring spares on site? Some best case will be next business day, or because the spare is in the warehouse, we need to get it, we need to send an engineer. So if a disk fails, the best case is probably a day or two to get those replaced if the spares were in country. What you're talking about with open compute is we already have the spares in your data center, even if you wish. So that the only thing that will be left to do is that time that the engineer comes and does the fix. And the fixes with the OCP equipment are very straightforward. All those advantages that Steve will mention later about toolless designs, you can do this thing on the fly. And part of the configurations that you do when you're doing the configuration for the equipment is to be able to make sure that you can get most of the work done by the software. So if you plug out a server, you actually don't need to do much configuration. You just need to slot in a new server and go sort the old one in terms of memory, or find out what was wrong. But the software in the backend will know how to balance and put that node back into the cluster. So that's all from me. I'll be happy to take questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And from a personal point of view, it's been a great journey to be on at Atlancis and Open Compute over the last 2 to 3 years. We've really made some great strides and look forward to being able to expand that across the continent. Now we'll pass to Steve Helvey, who's going to look at OCP hardware, the various elements and projects that exist within the data center and beyond, and some of the design tenets that make OCP a truly different proposition.
Thank you, Paul. Those are some great insights from Dr. Saghi about the challenges and the opportunities facing African businesses today. And then followed up by a great example from Daniel and the team at Atlancis about how they're addressing some of those challenges through open hardware. And anytime you have this concept of a new way replacing the old traditional way, it's an example of creative destruction. And this is a term used in economics where it's kind of out with the old and in with the new. And we all have the examples of this we can think of around Uber and M-Pesa, about something new and different replacing the old way of doing things. But when economists have studied this, it's not the big leap changes in technology that make the biggest impact. It's actually the small incremental changes that happen within the business and within a market or an industry that create the biggest overall impact. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk specifically about small incremental changes that are happening within hardware infrastructure that can make a pretty significant impact. But before I do, I want to talk about just a couple terms that I'll reference throughout the next few minutes. And one is OEM and the other one is ODM, or white box. So the OEM is an original equipment manufacturer, and they buy components from the design manufacturer. So they will buy those components, they will repackage them, brand them, and sell them to the mass market. Whereas the ODM is a manufacturer, so they'll do full product development services. The OEM tries to create a product that serves the biggest lion's share of the market. Whereas ODMs can also do that, but they can also manufacture very specialized solutions if needed. And on the support side, you have managed services and support from the OEM, whereas the ODM tends to be more of a product-centric support model. When you take that ODM model and you add open source to it, you get the Open Compute Project. So how did this work in the past here? So you had a bunch of new functionality that's created in the market. So the OEM evaluates this new functionality, decides what they want to incorporate in the next release, and then they move it out to the mass market and their users. So they determine what comes out to the users. In this new model, or the Open Compute model, you have a community-based engineering where you have a bunch of working groups working on common problems, identifying the technology, whether it be an end user, a vendor, a supplier, a consultant, all figuring out what is the best way to address a particular common problem, and then moving that technology directly to end users. So it's a very, very different model. How did it all begin? Well, this is an announcement from January 2010 when Facebook decided that they were going to build their own data centers. At that time, their infrastructure was growing quite rapidly, and they started to work directly with the manufacturers to say, how can we address certain problems that we're going to realize here in the next few months and years? So when they started from scratch and started brand new, they started asking themselves a lot of open-ended questions. What can we get rid of in the system? What do we actually need? Can we run things differently at higher temperatures? Do we really need certain things that I'm seeing within a server and a rack and a power and even a facility? And from that, they solved those problems, and then they open sourced the designs. And along with Microsoft, Rackspace, Intel, and Goldman Sachs, they created the Open Compute Project. And just recently, we've added Google as a board member as of a week ago. So right now within Open Compute, we have 150 plus companies, over 6,000 engineers working on common problems across different working groups, 150 different types of OCP recognized products and facilities in the market. We have working groups. These are the different projects within Open Compute. So we have volunteer leaders, again, 6,000 engineers working in each one of these type of projects, solving common problems, working together. Vendors, competitors, end users, everyone in a community-based engineering model. So there are really four things that drive everything we do at OCP: efficiency, scale, impact, and openness. And let me just give you a couple of examples of these traits. This is a server bezel, and we've all seen it. It's the little plastic thing that goes on the front of a server. And some people in the industry think, well, why are there so many different kinds of server bezels? Well, it seems to be one of these ideas of gratuitous differentiation. It's different for the sake of being different, and it doesn't really need to be. Here's an example of an OCP server. Toolless design, very simple, very vanity-free. They've stripped out all the unnecessary parts. And I want to call your attention to the highlighted areas. These are green touch points, where a server technician can easily use these green touch points to quickly and easily replace any component on the server. That's the efficiency of OCP type of designs. Here's another one. In a typical server, you might have 8 40mm fans. In an Open Compute server, the OU height, or the unit height, is a little bit larger, and we have 2 fans. And there's something called the fan cube law, and that is if I halve the speed of my fan, I can reduce the amount of energy it takes to turn that fan by 7/8. So again, bigger fans, I can turn them half as fast, I can reduce my energy needed 7/8, and I still get the same amount of airflow. How does this translate into real production? These are some examples. At 0% workload and 100% workload, OCP server designs versus traditional legacy OEM brands. And you can see the efficiency gains that SK Telecom out of Korea has gained. Also on the OpEx side, how easy is it? Well, Daniel mentioned a few things. Here is what Yahoo Japan is experiencing. You can see the different time trials that they've done on the left. And this may seem like not that big of a deal. But when you're talking about scale and you're talking about over a period of time, these differences add up to be quite impressive over a great deal of time. And you can reallocate resources to more productive efforts. Here are just a few examples. We have a lot of different types of industries using open compute. I've just pulled out a few here. Telcos are certainly adopting at pretty large scale. Internet exchanges. We see cloud hosting providers here, OVH and the Italian cloud provider. We see some fintechs really adopting open networking. And then, of course, public sector is on the rise as well. The Department of Energy in America is a pretty big user of open compute. How does this translate into actual revenue? Well, we have an analyst firm in the market that's tracking open compute revenue. And you can see that we're going to be topping 11 billion by 2023. There's a couple interesting notes here about how co-processors are going to be emerging with AI functionality and how current data centers are actually lacking some of the facilities needed as racks become more dense. So these are some of the obstacles that we will be working with the facility side to make sure that they're ready for these new types of infrastructure that are coming down the line. Let me just share a little bit about the server market and the market share. This is from Q4 of 2019. And you can see all the major server providers on the left, but I've highlighted one column there. It's ODM direct, the market share, and the growth. Most of those ODMs are doing open compute. So you can see the growth that people are feeling more and more comfortable going direct to the manufacturer when they know that they can get the same type of product with a great deal more flexibility with a multi-sourcing strategy. So here's the traditional model. If I'm an ODM, I would usually sell my parts to an OEM. The OEM would repackage them, and then I would sell those solutions into traditional customers, banks, telcos, public sectors. But if I was a big enough customer, if I was really big and really specialized, I could go to the ODM directly, such as a cloud service provider. In this new model, if I'm big enough and I have a big team, maybe I want to do this myself, I can still go directly to the ODM and purchase OCP equipment. But we also have a solution provider that sits right on the other side of the ODM, where they really know open compute. They know the software that goes on open compute. They work very tightly with the ODMs, and they'll do all of these full managed services, rack installations, operation support. And what we're finding is that it's no longer big customers and the rest of the market, but every single sector is starting to blend together about the type of support and services they need. We find some really big customers that still want to use a solution provider for the back-end support. And we find really small customers or very specialized customers that want to do it all themselves. But here's where Atlancis fits in. Atlancis can fit right here where the solution provider is, so they can take care of all those managed services for you. And they can also fit in the upper right. So let's say you're a very large company and you like to do things yourself, but you still want to have that back-end support, or maybe you need subcontracting in certain specialty areas for certain skill sets. Atlancis can fit into that as well. So we're seeing a lot of open compute deployments, and we're seeing a lot of growth. North Asia, South America, Europe, and of course, Africa, with Atlancis leading the way. And we hope over the next 6 to 12 months that we'll see more creative destruction in the data centers across Africa. So now I want to leave it open to questions for the audience, and we look forward to answering any that may come across. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Just going to check here on some of the questions that may be coming through. We hope you found that valuable and enjoyable. There's one here for Dr. Sagia. Dr. Sagia, as you'd mentioned a couple of things around planning versus execution, leapfrogging to kind of the value end. How, based on your conversations with industries and companies in Africa, how do you balance that planning versus execution and leapfrogging to the value end in addition to this circular economy approach and reuse and collaborative effort? So what are some of the things that you're telling people around being able to execute faster?
Thank you for that question. So one conversation that comes on is that, yes, there's this great strategy and all the paperwork put together and buy-in is good. And then when it comes to budgeting, budget starts to get stretched over a couple of years or a couple of financial periods, just because all can't be done at the same time using the traditional vanity approach. Now, that leads to extending when value is realized. And extending when that value is realized when it comes to technology, sometimes it means you can also get bypassed by technology advancements as well, or strategy can change, or competition can introduce something while you wait to get to the value realization point. So being able to plug in with models such as what OCP does is very important, in that one can execute faster, earlier, and get to the value point much quicker using the same budget. Also can start to experiment on various business models, much earlier on at a micro perspective, because the cost of carrying out a business model or executing a business model, is lowered, right? So that means that one can try more things and figure out what is that one thing that will not fail, that will succeed for the company, rather than involving just one big project and after another one, then hoping one of those ones will stick over a longer period of time. So that's where I see OCP speeding up, especially the execution phase of it, right? Then also for others, just getting to execution is a problem, because they're like, okay, if we need to do all this, that's what it costs. No, thank you. Where are the skills? Cost of acquiring the skills, again, a bit of a problem. Cost of footprints, we don't have a footprint right now. Let's wait until we get a bigger data center. So all those things lead towards not even starting the first place. So for those who at least are able to start, you can get to a much more accelerated model towards value. As far as circular economy goes, it just speaks for itself, right? I mean, we're all right now, even under the SDGs globally, and everybody needs to look at circular economy much more seriously across, right? So, and for Africa, there's nothing more relevant than circular economy, really.
Great. Yeah, some very, very good points. So moving on to the next question here, this would be either for Paul or Daniel. Is OCP compatible with existing infrastructure from other vendors that people may have in their estate?
Okay, I think I can take that, Steve. This is Daniel.
Okay.
So in terms of compatibility, OCP is very compatible with data center deployments that follow the open standards.
Okay, great. Next question is, what possibilities do you see for manufacturers of some of the components in Africa? So being able to produce some of the components locally around open compute. And I guess I would leave that open to any of the team here to answer.
So,
okay, I can answer that, or Gilbert can take that.
I just say one thing, that the opportunity is fantastic, as the open compute is openly published, and with the manufacturing capability that we should have in Africa, then there's very much the opportunity for local manufacturing. Sorry, Dr. Sagia, after you.
No, I wanted to hand over the question to either yourself or to Daniel, but just picking up on what you just said, right? So there are various attempts at manufacturing in Africa when it comes to technology, right? Most of the time it's assembly, and that's fine. But we think there's an opportunity to start going beyond just the hardware itself, to going into some of the soft structures as well, right? The intellectual property is starting to come from also being able to do design work at a layer above the hardware that's enabled by an open compute hardware platform, right? So I think there's need to start to create value along that, and not just look at manufacturing from a factory perspective of getting hard goods out, but also from how does intellectual property get built on top of what is happening right now. And as far as the IP goes for the traditional vanity models, which is held in very secure houses somewhere else and nobody's allowed to develop on top of them, that doesn't enable Africa in any shape or form to start to come up with their own models, right? So I think OCP also provides an opportunity to go just beyond the hardware manufacturing to one layer above, because when it comes to pure hardware manufacturing, scale is important, and therefore, other countries already have that scale models already worked out, right? Until Africa is able to get to that model where they can do stuff at scale, being competitive will become a problem. So I think the new niche that we can also focus on is just basically building intellectual property just one layer above the hardware.
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Segu. That building the IP or the software and services piece on top is where the value add is in many cases. So just a couple more here. How big of a team? Yeah, Daniel, you had mentioned that you have around 50 people on your team, but if I'm a regular customer in Africa, how many people would I need on my team to start with Open Compute?
Thank you, Steve. The good thing about Open Compute is what you're trying to do as a solution provider is you'll not really have to do a lot of changes around your software stack, because we are still using VMware, we are using Red Hat or many other solutions. We also have even appliances that are already certified for SAP workloads, for Oracle workloads, and the rest. So what changes is actually just the underlying infrastructure in terms of the hardware and how that hardware is managed by use of software defined, whether it's network or storage. The lock-in is actually the hardware is being disaggregated at hardware level. So it will actually even need fewer people when you are talking about management. For example, the infrastructure does not come with specialized software. If I want to get a storage, we'll give you, for example, a device from an ODM that is open. You can either use the Red Hat Safe for management in terms of storage. You can use VMware Sun, vSun for storage management. So you have a couple of technologies that are already in the market that are available for management of this infrastructure. The only thing that changes is it gives you more openness by being able to disaggregate and remove that lock-in, that you have to use my controller, or you have to use my disk, or you have to use my memory from a particular OEM. So in terms of the people, it's actually less hands. The other things that we talked about is so easy to manage. You can actually even do the parts replacement yourself as a customer, because of everything is software defined. If a node has failed, you just remove the whole node and put in a new one. If a disk has failed and you're running a software-defined architecture, it's easy for you to pull out a shelf and replace the faulty disk, or put a completely new shelf and do the software does all the stuff in the back end. So in terms of hands, it's actually much easier. And the reason for this is because it has been built as part of the solution. Guys like Facebook, and I'm sure Steve can mention, guys like Facebook, who are the founders of Open Compute, and Google and Microsoft Azure, they run thousands of servers in one data center, but you'll find like a data center of 10,000 servers is managed by 2 or 3 people. So that just comes to show that how simple it is to manage Open Compute infrastructure when set up in the right way.
Thank you, Daniel. And one last question here. I'll throw this over to Paul. Paul, if people wanted to try Open Compute without spending a lot of money on a POC, what would be your recommendation for them to get a look and feel of the hardware in a cost-effective way, or even remotely?
Thank you, Steve. Good question. So at Atlancis, we've developed a laboratory environment where customers can test workloads and software and applications in a remote way, or come to our laboratory and do it in person. And then also we are, at the moment, we've got a number of POCs that are being delivered through offsite infrastructure, which can also be accessible to customers. So, I mean, firstly, we'd ask, come and talk to us and let us understand what you're trying to achieve. I think everyone's got a feel today that adopting an OCP strategy in the data center can help with reducing CapEx, reducing OpEx, reducing CO2 emissions. But what Atlancis will do is guide you on the journey to an OCP strategy in your data center, whether it be small or large, and understand your current TCO, your data center space, your running costs, your licensing, and the workloads that you project in the future and that you have now. We have a deep understanding, as Dan alluded to, of legacy systems, and we can help project an implementation, an ongoing training support as to how you utilize the benefits of OCP in the data center. So in short, there's a laboratory environment which is open to customers, and then also we are adapting our infrastructure to deliver POC into customer data centers in a remote manner.
Great. And for everyone online, you can see in the chat window there that Michael, my colleague, has put a link to where POCs can actually be tested. So Daniel shared that link where POCs can be tested for free. And we also included the link to the OCP marketplace that has a detailed view of the Atlancis OCP offerings. So thank you all for joining us today. We will this is again the first in a series of 3 webinars that we will be hosting over the next few months. And so be looking for the announcement of the date and the subject for the upcoming webinar. It will most likely be around software-defined data centers and how people are adopting that to an OCP optimized data center infrastructure. So thank you all. Appreciate your time and have a great day.